Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live, Thursday, October the 7th. As you can see, I'm Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10 on the Twitter, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by Sean Martin. How are you, Sean?
Not bad, Tony. Yourself?
I'm good. Right, first things first, get the business out of the road. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit the subscribe button and you'll get access to all these live videos and whenever we go live, and you get notifications of when the videos are happening in the pods, and also access to some marvellous Celtic journalistic content on the Celtic Way. Now, as it's International Week, Sean, we thought we'd experiment, didn't we? And we are going, as a gift for people who have subscribed and who watch the pods on a daily basis, we're going to hand the reins over to the subscribers to put in their comment section and set the agenda for today in a Celtic way, kind of way. So if you've got anything that you'd like to discuss, just post your questions or your comments in the comment section, and myself and Sean will bat them around and we'll bring you back in if you've got other things to say on that. So what do you think, Sean? Handing control over to the viewers, the watchers, the subscribers. Are we putting our life in our own hands here?
Probably, but handing control to the masses, that's something I can get on board with, I think. That's something I can get on board with. But I'll start us off anyway while we're waiting on a couple of questions to come in. I noticed today that Kyogo apparently has revealed a goal target and he wants more than Odsonne Edouard. He didn't mention him by name, but he basically... no, he did. He actually did. He did mention him by name. So what do you think of that? Do you think he's setting himself up for a failure there? Do you think he can do that pretty comfortably if he stays fit?
Well, he's got 8 and 11, hasn't he?
He has.
4 league goals. So yeah, I mean, I think that shows you how confident Kyogo is, or clearly feels. He clearly feels it whenever he goes onto the park, he can score. You know, so I think players, you know, you get some strikers that don't like to reveal targets. You get others that do. You know, I spoke to strikers before in your job, and they say, I don't want to reveal my target in case I don't hit it and I feel disappointed. Whereas others are quite happy setting a high bar and saying, look, that's what I want to go for. So you can look at it two ways, can't you, Sean? But I think it shows a wee kind of inner confidence in Kyogo, and he just seems to be happy. And if he hits that target or not, so be it. But it's an ambitious one, certainly.
I like it. I think there's a risk involved going public and saying, especially naming someone else who was all right. It might have ended on a kind of a down note, but he's a very good player, Odsonne Edouard, very consistent in terms of the actual numbers. So for him to name him and say, I want to do better than him, that's a risky business, but it's a big bit of confidence.
Yeah. Now here's a question, Sean, from Alex. Araujo. Good evening from Australia. Good evening, Alex. I hope you're well. I'm curious to know how Celtic went from winning 9 consecutive league titles to the current state of the squad. Sean, that is the $64,000 question and what every Celtic fan wants to know, isn't it?
It is, aye. I mean, we've talked about some of the stuff, and we've both written different columns about when Dom Mackay left. We both try to take stock of what was going on. And it seems to I think both of us really that it does stem from above. It wasn't necessarily the playing staff or even the manager as much last year, despite the fact that results obviously weren't getting weren't where they should have been last year. I think we both agree. I think, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, that it starts and probably ends with above those players and managers.
Yeah, very much so. We've both written extensively and lengthy articles about that, and I kind of agree with and concur with what you're saying there, Sean. I think I think it's time Celtic kind of moved on as well. You know, last season's gone. There's nothing they can do about it. There will be, I've said before, there'll be university dissertations and theses and papers written on this in years to come about. And I always said that probably should take out the copyright, because I said it'll probably be named "The Men Who Blew the 10." You know, something like that. So you will find something like that in years to come, and you know that maybe the full story will come out in time. But I think it's just too raw for a lot of people that are at the club, a lot of Celtic supporters, and I think they just have to put it down and chalk it up to experience and say it never happened and move on. Now here's a question for me from Central Scott, which that's Central Scott, Tony Haggerty, trophies aside, John Collins versus Callum McGregor, who's the better player? See, when you ask me questions like that, that's no fair.
I'll caveat it for you, Tony, that you can't have a cop out and say, well, John Collins played left mid and Callum McGregor's a centre mid.
Right, okay. See, if you're going to ask me to Neil McAllister, I actually thought that John Collins was a wonderfully gifted footballer. I really did. I felt that he was a case of the right player at the wrong time in the club's history, and probably could have won more, but he was such an elegant footballer. And I think John Collins and Paul McStay carried Celtic through those kind of barren years of the early 90s. And I would love to have seen John Collins and McStay in a team that was challenging and winning, countless trophies and trebles, just as Callum McGregor is. Callum McGregor's worth, we've already spoken about Callum McGregor's worth to the team and what he brings. And I guess it's different eras. But I'd maybe, at this moment, because I admired him very, very much, I would say John Collins edges it for me slightly. But I think given time, and if Callum McGregor stays for a while, then it's obvious that he will become, in my mind, a better player than John Collins. Hope that answers your question, Central Scott. McGregor for me, says David Bradley. That's fair. It's all about opinions, isn't it? Really,
it is indeed.
There's
a few coming in here, either ors, but I'm going to take a question here on the actual team just now, and it's morning guys from Philip Dodds. Once we have a full complement of players, who do you think is Ange's first choice back four and front three? Now that latter one there might lead you on to a plug for your latest article, Tony. But
yeah. Well, the plug for my latest article, we'll go with the front three. I was comparing the three Amigos of 95, 96, Jos Cadet, Paulo Di Canio, Pierre Van Hooijdonk, and I called these guys the new Amigos, Jota, Kyogo, and Lael Abada. Now, I wasn't comparing them in terms of ability and goal-scoring prowess. I was just comparing them to the fact that the way the team actually plays. And I sort of said that Ange was kind of nodding to Tommy Burns with the three-pronged attack and that kind of stuff. So before anybody goes off their head, and I also caveated it by saying that Tommy Burns' team never won the trophy, but they never won the league, but they entertained. And I said, but this Ange Postecoglou's three-pronged attacks offering Celtic new hope. That was a kind of the gist of the article. So if you want to have a read at it, then let me know your thoughts. It'd be good to see them and hear them. But the complement of players getting back to full fitness, first choice back four. Sean, you're quite outspoken about this, or you've had a few things to say about it.
Yeah, I think I made a point of basically pointing out that in his first 14 games, through various reasons like availability, players not being signed, injury, that kind of thing, Ange Postecoglou used 6 different centre-back pairings in those 14 games. So on that basis, and the fact that in his most successful teams in the recent past have been based on consistency of selection at centre-back, even when rotating the forward players has been a common occurrence, he needs to settle on a certainly a back pairing, if not a full back four, that barring injury, play every week, basically. On that basis, the questions about when everybody's back fit and firing, I think Juranovic has been signed to be the first choice right back. I think Greg Taylor, when he's fit, is the first choice left back. And as it stands, I think it's maybe Cameron Carter-Vickers and Christopher Julian when he's fit as the centre backs for me. But as it stands, obviously now that I think he'll stick with Carter-Vickers and Starfelt, and it looks as if Welsh is going to be that deputy role that we thought at the beginning of the season. Well,
I've got a request from Feed the Bear, and it's Big Tony. Gives a smile. I'll accede to that request. There you go. But no, I totally agree, Sean. I think when Julian comes back, I think the Celtic supporters would feel more confident going forward with Julian and the likes of Cameron Carter-Vickers, because I think their personal jury's still out in Starfelt, isn't it?
I think so. But on that note, Brian Murphy's pointed out about Starfelt here, and this is another thing that I wrote about with Stephen Welsh when he was partnering in Starfelt, the AZ first leg. Postecoglou switched them from right centre back to left centre back, vice versa. And I didn't know if that, at the time, if that was because Welsh was younger and they could maybe mould him to be left centre back and let Starfelt go back to the right centre back position that he played with Gothenburg or not. But it could have been preempting the fact that Julien would come back and play left centre back, as Brian's mentioning here. I don't know if it will make him more comfortable, because I think the short time we saw him at right centre back, he didn't look any more comfortable. He still looked the same. I think there's been periods in games where he has looked okay and he has looked comfortable. I think actually the Rangers game, we both agreed that was probably his better game, one of his better games. And I think that might have been because he had more actual defending to do as well. It's more the other side of his game, the concentration, the kind of shaky distribution at times that people are worried about, I think. So, in answer to your question, Brian, I'm just not sure. I don't know if playing him right centre back will make him more comfortable, or if it's just one of those things that it's not in his wheelhouse to be passing out from the back, in which case you're then again looking higher up as to who signs people. But
now, here's a question for you, Sean, in transit. Does Celtic need more of a dynamic attacking defensive midfielder to better support and strengthen the middle of the park? If so, are there any names that come to mind or spring to mind?
Yes, Ryan Christie, but he's obviously away. So, I think he filled all sorts of gaps in that midfield and helped Ange tactically with shifting people about as needed. I think they didn't replace him when they realised he was leaving. I think they probably, as much as I thought he should have stayed, ultimately, if he wants to go, he wants to go, and that's fair play. But I think if they genuinely thought he was going to go, they should have had someone to come in to replace him. I don't think the centre mids that they did sign were capable of filling the kind of holes that he could fill. So I think a player of that ilk would help box to box, but is also in the traditional sense of box to box, as in relentlessly up and down, persistent. He could also fill in wide left as needed. But I think
as in a Stan Petrov type. Well, what you're talking about, yes. Is that what you were alluding to? Yes, yeah, that kind of
that kind of quality. Yeah, you can dream about that kind of quality. But that's the thing. It's not just run up and down box to box, just running and running and running. You need to have the quality when you get the ball if you play for Celtic, and that's where some players fall down, you would say.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I'm going through the comments here to see if we have any. Brian, no, we've already read Brian's, haven't we? Or have we? David Bradley comes in to talk about Taylor, who says, Tony and Sean, I think Taylor is very weak, especially in Europe, and his passing is very poor when pressured. We need a lot better. And Sean, you wrote an article about Greg Taylor and why he deserved his bumper contract, and you see him as the first choice left back moving forward. Now, you've caveated that by saying there are better players, but you see him right now as being the first choice left back moving forward.
Aye, because I think Ange has made that clear. If he's been his first choice from the minute he walked in the door. Now you could argue that's because there's a lack of alternatives. You could argue that. I definitely have said that I don't think it's mutually exclusive that you can think that Taylor's capable for Celtic just now, but also think that if a better left back becomes available, that Celtic should be looking at it. I think both of those statements can be true. I don't think Taylor's anywhere near as bad as what the perception of him is. But that said, and I've addressed it in the article as well, that there are drawbacks to his game. He's got shortcomings. We'd kind of discussed a wee bit of it yesterday, but as of now, I don't see how anybody can argue that he's the first choice left back. And it might be that the caveat that they're going to say is because there's nobody else better than now. But that might be the case. He is the first choice, and I think whether you think he's going to be the first choice for the next 4 years of the duration of the deal that he's going to sign is irrelevant, because right now he's the first choice, and if he happens to be the second choice come the end of those 4 years, then you would presume he would be an able deputy.
Does Liam Scales come into your thinking at all, Sean, moving forward?
Not as yet, not until he actually gets a chance and improves his of the quality to play, really. He's only had that half hour at Raith Rovers. He said himself he's a centre-back, although he can play left-back, and he's played left wing-back as well. But until he actually gets a chance to play left-back, then I don't have much to say about it, really. But
now, I'm going to put this up because I'm going to explain. William Aitchison comes in and says, what is this gibberish garbage? William, if you weren't here at the start, we have thrown control over to the viewers, the subscribers and the listeners, and they're setting the agenda for today, and they're putting questions in the comment section. So if you'd like to put a question in the comment section, that's fine. That's what we're doing today. We're handing control over to you guys. So hopefully you're enjoying the content, and we're just shooting the breeze about all things Celtic. So thank you for that wonderful contribution, William. And here's another one from me, Sean, from Central Scott. Davie Provan versus James Forrest. Who's the better right winger? They're at it with me now, aren't they? They're just trying to pin me down here. I will say, by virtue of the fact that he's one of the most decorated players at the club, and he is a vital part and cog in the green and white machine, I would have to say James Forrest on that one. But I will also caveat and say Davie Provan gave one of my finest memories in football, because he scored that wonderful free kick in 1985. And that was the first Scottish Cup final I ever went to as a Celtic supporter. So 12 years of age, and had a wonderful view of that. So I will an honourable mention for Davie Provan. Right, here's one for you, Sean.
A fellow Inverclyde man.
Here's one for you, Sean.
Okay,
who's the best, Paul McStay or Bruni? I'm throwing that to you, Sean.
Listen, there is only one answer to that if you're talking about player, innit? But to play devil's advocate, you could suggest the captaincy reins that you give the edge to Bruni. Certainly trophy count. But I think, even though I only caught the tail end of McStay, you know what he's about, and I think everybody knows Paul McStay was a better footballer.
The maestro moniker speaks for itself. Although Bruni left captain, leader, legend, that's one that you could debate for years and years and years. I'm with you. I think Paul McStay, in terms of talent and football, edges it. Scott Brown wins hands down in terms of trophies won. But there you go. Okay, here we go. Bob White coming in on the scales. Scales hasn't played because Ange doesn't rate him, and Ange never signed him. Well, that's a matter of conjecture, isn't it? But yeah, there might be some truth in that. What do you think? But that, Sean, do you think that's a fair comment?
It could be. You could argue that, you touched on it yesterday, is the only player that we absolutely know that Postecoglou definitely wanted to sign was Kyogo, who has been the resounding success so far. That's not to say every player that he earmarked personally will be a success, but there's a chance that, again, this goes to the higher ups question, where who is signing, who's signing off, who's scouting them, what is the kind of list that they're checking off to make them eligible to come to Celtic, to play for Celtic, that kind of thing. So I don't think it's out with the realms of possibility that Scales is one of many that Celtic have signed that it wasn't really signed off by the manager. But yeah, that is possible.
And there you go. There's your question that you thought would come in from Alex from South Australia. On you go, Sean. Take the stage. What do the Celtic fans think of Ange?
Far be it from me to speak for the whole fan base, but I'll speak for myself. I think I'm behind him. I think his principles and certainly the way that he comes across in describing them is easy to get behind. I think the players seem to be buying into it. Whether you could argue that they're executing it as well as possible so far is up for debate. But I think when you do a wee bit of digging into Ange's background, I think anybody, and Alex might be able to shed some light on it as well. I think there is always this kind of initial bumpy stage where the principles are taking hold, and there's maybe a couple of poorer results that you need to kind of push through and still believe in the principles and stuff. And it's not necessarily the system as much as the style. I think it was an interview with Brendan Rodgers the other week, basically it resurfaced again. Might not be able to mention him here, but I resurfaced with him the other day saying it doesn't matter what the system is as much as what you're telling him to do in the system. So, Ange has made it clear the kind of football he wants to play. He said himself it's the kind of football that he would like his dad to have enjoyed, that kind of thing. You could, and we have debated whether he should maybe divert from them at times. He's not going to. I think that's obvious. So I think it's probably beneficial to get behind it while he's here.
Indeed. Now, going to end with a belter, Sean. Feed the Bear, Jinky or Henrik Larsson. Now, all I will say on this is that in the vote for the greatest ever Celtic footballer, that was won by Jimmy Johnston. But Henrik Larsson was the only foreign player to make the Celtic greatest ever 11.
Yep.
So make what you want out of that. Think you go with majority rule, and people of a certain vintage will say Jimmy Johnston, others will say Henrik Larsson if they're younger, but both of them were in the greatest ever Celtic 11. Jinky was voted the greatest ever Celtic player. That to me is kind of a conclusive result on that one.
Potentially, aye. I mean, that was in 2002 that the greatest ever team was voted for. All right, there was another 2 years, but it was before Seville, before Larsson done all that as well. I believe at a time he was also the only player to score twice now. It was either a UEFA Cup or a European final in total and lose, which seems just bonkers. I don't know. It might be recency bias. It might be my generational bias. I slightly give Henrik the nod, but that is probably because he was the one when I grew up.
It's up for question.
Likewise, you watch the footage. You watch the footage of Jinky as well. I remember my nonno telling me about him and how fast his feet were and stuff like that, and the Lord of the Wing DVD and all that. And I mean, what I will say is there's no wrong answer.
No, correct. I think
when it comes to renditions of Dirty Old Town, it's certainly Jinky anyway.
I think, and I use this a lot, and I say two players that brought unbridled joy to their generation of Celtic supporters. You can't really separate them, because my father's generation will always come down on the side of Jimmy Johnston, and your generation, possibly mine, would say Henrik Larsson. So as you say, it's it's a generational and age thing, isn't it? So if you were to have that vote again, it might be different.
It might be different, but I think it speaks to the legacy. It also speaks to the fans keeping the legacies alive and stuff, as much as the footage and stuff. That it is even still a debate when it's been so long since anybody really, well, not anybody, but a lot of fans will have seen him live. So I think that speaks to the legacy of the man.
I think it's fair to say that they both earned the moniker two magnificent sevens. And on that wonderfully high note, we shall end today's broadcast. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Really enjoyed that. I think that could become a regular feature during international weeks, because that was awesome. Thanks for your contribution. Appreciate it. And remember, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit the subscribe button, and you'll get links to all the videos when we go live and notifications. And obviously, you'll read the superb Celtic journalistic content on the Celtic Way. Thanks very much. Cheers, Sean.
Cheers, Tony.